people tell us to follow the Sunnah, does it mean I have to dress the way people dress in Arabia? Is that what is meant to follow the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ in those kind of styles?
AlMaghrib Institute presents Q&A with Shaykh Yahya Ibrahim.
The Prophet ﷺ wore the same clothing that the people in his time wore. He wore a turban to protect himself from the heat. He wore a qamis to shelter himself, to cloak himself in a way that was dignified, but was very similar in its fashion and cultural standing, the way other people, believers and unbelievers, wore it. There were certain preferences that he had for certain colors. He loved the color white, and he ordered us to shroud our dead in it because it shows when it's clean and when it's impure. But I want you to know that the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ is not only about the physical. It's not a physical representation. It actually begins in the heart, where you prefer what the Prophet preferred and find dissatisfaction in what he was dissatisfied with, where you want your heart's leanings and your statements of your tongue and your physical reality to mimic an expression of faith, solidarity, and belief in him and his Sahaba and those who accepted the truth from that time until the end of time. Allahumma ameen. The Sunnah is salvation. The Sunnah is the totality of our belief as Muslims, the practices that we do that are taught and passed on to us generation after the next by erudite and scholarly righteous men and women. It is the teaching of the Prophet ﷺ that shines the reflection of the Quran into our lives. And when we talk about the Sunnah, we mean it in the way of Aisha radiallahu anha, where she says the Quran, the Prophet ﷺ was its physical representation walking amongst mankind. كان القرآن يمشي بين الناس. The Prophet ﷺ, if you wanted to see his Sunnah, his habit, he was the Quran enacted and living embodiment of it amongst people. So therefore you ask yourself this question: what would the Prophet do in my situation? What would the Prophet watch on his phone if he was given one? What would the Prophet say in a situation where he was invited to this or asked to turn away from that? How would the Prophet ﷺ construct his decision making is where you want to take the Sunnah from it and construct your decision-making scheme in a similar way. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us all more aligned with the Sunnah and allow us to be led upon a path of righteousness and purity, which his Sunnah is as-sirat al-mustaqim. Allahumma ameen.